Hi, and welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Center video podcast. Uh, we have today a lot of news, and we're still waiting for the first visitors. But we can, yeah, I welcome the first visitor in this live chat and live video podcast by the European Resilience Initiative Center, and we can discuss today the story behind the spectacular allegedly death of Yevgeniy Prigozhin, who is the owner of Wagner franchise, but he's not a leader of Wagner. We need to clearly divide between the Wagner Group, which was created not by Prigozhin but Dmitry Utkin, who is, by the way, allegedly died in the same plane crash, and Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was like the face of Wagner for the last months and slightly over a year. And first, what do we know? Let's stick to the facts, because exactly as I told you during the situation with the Wagner mutiny, we need to clearly discriminate between what we know and what we can assume. Like back then, we only knew that Wagner Group has taken over Rostov and marched to Moscow, and Prigozhin published some videos. But we didn't know what it's all about, who are allies of Prigozhin, how strong is the resistance of the Russian army, what are the goals. And then I told you, we don't know. Like when Prigozhin signed, suddenly signed some deal with Putin. Those who visited my last live chat with this topic, they remember I said we don't know who has been signed what and what they have agreed on, but we know that no agreements with Vladimir Putin worth a paper they have been signed on. You can only capitulate to Vladimir Putin, but this doesn't give you any guarantees, and that only means that Vladimir Putin accepts your capitulation, and now he knows that he can do whatever he wants with you. And you can be a dead man next day, next month, next year, but you definitely have no guarantees. And that is actually what happened now. Like what we know now. We know that there was a plane which was owned by Yevgeny Prigozhin himself, and this plane crashed close to Moscow. We know that the Russian Rosaviatsia, this is a Russian aviation oversight authority, they have confirmed that Yevgeny Prigozhin has been among the passengers on this plane according to the list. Like they haven't confirmed that he was dead, but they know that he was in the passengers list. That's actually what we know. What we also know is that Prigozhin's Telegram channel's Grey Zone, which is Prigozhin's pocket media, said that Prigozhin's plane was allegedly shot down by the Russian air defense. They didn't say was it an attempt to kill Prigozhin, or was it some false launch of a missile. We don't know, but these three facts we know. We also know that there are videos which haven't been confirmed, but there are videos allegedly of the plane crash, and the witness who was shooting this video said that there had been two explosions heard in the air before the plane crashed. But here, please take it with some grain of salt, because we don't know who has shot these videos. Was it Prigozhin's plane? No idea. I personally think that it was Prigozhin's plane, but we cannot prove it. So three facts we have clearly: Prigozhin's plane has crashed. Rosaviatsia said Prigozhin was on the plane, and three, Prigozhin's media say Prigozhin's plane was shot down. So now let us stick, and I will go to your questions. You can leave questions in your chat, comments. If you think that I pay too much attention to some details, please tell me so. If you think I'm talking too loud or too fast or too slow, please tell me so. If you have any comments, if you see any news, please leave them in the commentary section. I promise you, I read carefully what you write, and I will go one by one to the questions, and I think we'll have good time discussing the things. So The first idea which comes into mind, like Prigozhin was killed by Vladimir Putin or by someone in Kremlin, and we ask ourselves, like, is it possible? Like, can it be what has happened? And the answer is yes. I think it can be true. So let us go back into history. If there have been any spectacular crushes by the planes with enemies of Vladimir Putin, we know that Vladimir Putin is famous, or let's formulate it differently. We know that people die in Russia by different means, like they die by falling out of windows, they die by getting poisoned. Sometimes they commit suicide, like Boris Berezovsky, the godfather of Vladimir Putin, who hanged himself on a scarf in his London house. We know that some people drink some poison tea, that some people like suddenly feel ill and die. But plane crashes, like, it's like way too spectacular, isn't it? Uh, um, I would say no. We have enough plane crashes of people in Russia which you cannot explain. Like, the most famous one is the plane crash of Artem Borovik, who was a publisher of Совершенно Секретно, classified, literally translated, media in Russia, and he was into investigation of Putin's race to power, and allegedly got like a lot of attention by Vladimir Putin. And his plane crashed like while like on ascent from an airport, and he died. Pretty spectacular death, and everyone on board died. But it's not the only crash. There has been also, even before Vladimir Putin came to power, there was a death of General Alexander Lebed, a very popular general, actually a very seldom case in Russian army. Normally, Russian generals are not people who can be charismatic. They're mostly like heavy drunk, but Lebed, like, who also, of course, was not without, but he was really charismatic, especially after Chechnya war, and he won elections in Krasnoyarsk region in Siberia, and he challenged President Yeltsin himself and had clearly presidential ambitions. So he died in a helicopter crash, as his helicopter team allegedly was not careful enough and flew into a power transmission line. Actually, the same what happened allegedly to the plane of Polish President Kaczynski, when we know that the official version is that the pilots at Kaczynski plane were not careful enough, they were under pressure by Kaczynski, and that led to Smolensk plane crash. But in each of these cases, we know that people who died, they had problems with Kremlin, severe problems, and they all died in a plane crash. So it is not uncommon in Russia that people who have problems with Kremlin, that they die in a plane crash. So the first question seems to be cleared. There had been cases with plane crashes when we had at least a suspicion that people died not because of some technical issue, but because of some wish to kill them. Of course, we may not exclude, like, if I would have been like a lawyer, like, who would have investigated the case, I would say we cannot exclude technical issues. We know that the Russian aviation is suffering on the lack of parts. The sanctions work. We know that a lot of Russian airplanes, like passenger airplanes, Boeing's, Airbus, they have repeatedly problems before takeoff. Many planes were green lighted for takeoff with continuous problems. We know that the Russians cannibalize their planes. They have like hijacked by the West because the planes belong technically to, not technically, like legally, they belong to Western producers, but the Russians say we don't pay money back, we just seize them, and the Western companies stopped maintenance. So the Russians cannibalize airplanes, passenger airplanes, like taking parts from some plane and replacing the problem parts of the flying planes. So we cannot exclude that Prigozhin's plane also suffered from some sort of maintenance issues, and it could lead to catastrophe. But um, we have this video with allegedly two explosions in the air. We have the saying of Prigozhin's media channel that his plane has been shot down. And what is much more important, we know that Prigozhin had challenged Vladimir Putin himself. Like, despite of the fact, like, if Prigozhin said, "I have never challenged Putin. I only challenged Shoigu and Gerasimov and others," we know that he challenged Vladimir Putin. And as I said here before, you cannot go into deal with president in Russia. It can be Vladimir Putin, it can be Boris Yeltsin, it can be Mikhail Gorbachev, it can be anyone. You just do not. We have this perfect saying of Russian Emperor Pavel I in 18th century, who said to, I think it was a French ambassador, and the French ambassador asked Emperor Pavel, like, what are like some strange relations between like the emperor and his aristocracy? And the emperor laughed and said, "In my country, everyone is aristocrat when I talk to him, and only as long I am talking to him." So the moment you are out of attention of the emperor or president, or you call them, you have no rights. That is the same what the Russian Tsar Ivan the Terrible in the 16th century wrote to refugee Count Kurbsky when he said, "We, the Tsars, are empowered to promote our slaves and to punish our slaves." And he meant like as a slaves, he meant like everyone, including Count Kurbsky himself. So the same logic is in Vladimir Putin's actions. You cannot, as a subordinate, sign any deal with Vladimir Putin. Your life is in danger the very moment Vladimir Putin sees you as an enemy, and you can sign any treaty with him, any contract. It worth nothing. So now is the question: what comes after? And before we go to this question, of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We still need 220 subscriptions to open new options. Like, that's why please subscribe. Also to be informed about the new live broadcastings or new interviews we publish. Like, share, invite your friends. And now let's go to the questions or comments you posted. So Angel wrote, "Hello, what do you think this will do for the Wagner Africa operations?" Well, that is a good question. I think that the Russian presence in Africa is existing independently on if Prigozhin is alive or Utkin is alive. Like, we need to remember that allegedly Dmitry Utkin, who was actually a founder of Wagner Group and the commander of Wagner Group, allegedly he died in the same plane crash. And Dmitry Utkin is an interesting person, like a totally like weird person. He was born in eastern Ukraine in Donetsk region, if I'm not mistaken, and he served in Soviet army in GRU Spetsnaz. And then, like when he retired, he started to work as a mercenary, and Wagner was his call sign. Like, that's how the Wagner Group appeared. It was first not Wagner Group, but Wagner's Group, like Группа Wagnera, a group of Wagner, because he was a commanding officer, like a platoon leader, squad leader of this group. And he has chosen this Wagner call sign because he is a Nazi, and he believed Wagner is a very cool sign because Wagner is a favorite communist of Adolf Hitler. And Dmitry Utkin had his tattoos here, like on his collarbones, tattoos in form of insignias of SS, of German SS units, like with this Blitz Sieg runes. And Wagner was his call sign. So to our allegedly dead Yevgeniy Prigozhin, the official face of Wagner and money source for Wagner, or not money source. Money source was the Russian government, but Prigozhin was some sort of like a legal construction which distributed this money. and Dmitry Utkin, who was the founding father of Wagner and the mastermind behind military operations. So now, what is the consequence for all Africa operations? I think nothing will change. Like mostly nothing will change, because the Russian interest in Africa will remain. The money came from the Russian budget. The structures were under control of GRU, of Russian military intelligence directorate. Of course, there will be like some minor consequences with change of the chain of command, with like some financing schemes which should be reviewed or like changed. But Russia will continue to be present in the region, and we know that they try to buy the African governments, and they try to invite African leaders to Moscow, to Petersburg, to influence them. So I think strategically nothing will change. Of course, tactically there will be like some consequences, but they will try to do the same. Another question is if they are able to maintain their presence in Africa. That is a question, because what we saw from the last attempted summit of Africa countries in Russia, only very few leaders came, and only those like who were absolutely dependent on Moscow. So I think all the story that Russia is winning hearts and minds in Africa and is like so good and so massively presented in the region, I think it's a bit of Russian propaganda. The same as they told us the Russian army is undefeatable. The same they told us that Russian lunar model will land on the moon, etc. The same they tell us that they are irreplaceable in Africa. We know that other countries, also non-democratic countries like China, are much more presented in Africa and have much more influence. So the Russians will try to try to affect through influence African countries, but I'm not sure they will succeed on strategic way. But the death of Prigozhin or Utkin, I don't think it will change something massively. Of course, there will be minor turbulences, but not strategically. The next question is from Albrecht's 1979. Do you also think that the Kremlin will try to blame this on Ukraine agents? I think so. I think so. I can also imagine that there will be some massive funeral of Prigozhin and the others. I can imagine there will be like some public statement that it was like the West and the enemies. Why not? Once again, it's a long tradition of these things. Like think of the murder of Kirov in 1937, I think. He was a popular leader of the Communist Party in the Soviet Russia, and he was a rival of Joseph Stalin himself, much more popular person, and he was killed in the very premises of Smolny, of Leningrad party main headquarter of the Communist Party in Leningrad. He was killed in a corridor, uh, as we know now, by an NKVD agent. But of course, Stalin used this murder on his opponent to blame the opposition and the alleged Western agents, and there came a massive purge in Leningrad, and a lot of party officers have been arrested and tortured and executed. So, of course, there will be some attempts to blame the West, the Ukrainians, and the others. I think like something will happen like with Daria Dugina. Like Daria Dugina, who was actually like a very like mid-level, even low-level propagandist of Russian supremacy, and who was killed in a car blast, which we until now we don't know like who was responsible for that. I think it was Kremlin. But like she's now some sort of a saint hero, and there are streets renamed in honor of Daria Dugina, a daughter of Alexander Dugin, a Russian far right Nazi propagandist and ideologist. The streets have been remained in occupied territories of Ukraine. I think they will be the same with Yevgeniy Prigozhin. The dead opponents of Putin are of much more value for him, because he can like show them off and say, look, they were all good guys, decent guys, and they're all good. Like, and I do in behalf of them, on behalf of them. Richard Lyons, does this strengthen Putin's position? Well, that is a good question. And I already discussed it today, shortly after Prigozhin's death with my friend. And I think we need to divide here, like the strengthening in absolute way of numbering it, and in some sort of what is the opposite? I'm sorry. What is the opposite of absolute in comparable way? Like if you think that Vladimir Putin cleans his opponents groups and weakens his opponents groups, it makes him stronger, of course, relatively, absolutely, and relatively. So of course, we need to look at this in a broader perspective. Like, it's not only Prigozhin who died today, or allegedly Utkin also. It is also General Surovikin, who has allegedly been deprived of his position of the commander of Air Force and Space Force in Russia. Although on the official webpage of Russian Ministry of Defense, I checked it a couple of hours ago, he is still counted as an acting commander. But according to Russian media, also the Russian most official RIA Novosti, state-owned news agency, General Surovikin has been fired from his position of commander of Russian Air Force and Space Force. And Surovikin was seen as allegedly Prigozhin's ally in this mutiny, and he was allegedly arrested a month and a half ago, and nobody has seen him after that. And there were rumors what happened to him, if he's alive, if he's dead, if he's under trial, if he's in some sort of a prison. We don't know. But yesterday, the first rumors appeared that General Surovikin has been deprived of his position of a commander, and it was published by RIA Novosti itself. And RIA Novosti never published something like that without a clear order to publish it, not a permission, order to publish it. So we need to ask ourselves, why did they publish it? And now Prigozhin dies. So in a broader perspective, we can identify it as an attempt to weaken Putin's opponents. And in a mid-term and short-term perspective, of course, it makes Putin stronger because it weakens his opponents. But the question is, do you want to be a strong leader among that area where you don't have any capable officers, generals, etc.? I don't say that Surovikin was genius, but at least he could do something, like he did something in Syria, etc. Prigozhin was also not the worst officer of Vladimir Putin, maybe not the best officer in Russia or in Europe, but also not the worst one in Russia. So does it make Vladimir Putin strategically stronger if he needs to kill his former friends or allies? And Prigozhin, of course, was Putin's ally for a longer time and even believed he is Putin's friend. I don't think Putin has friends, but Prigozhin believed he's friend of Putin. Does it make Vladimir Putin stronger, or does it say us that Putin is strong when he needs to kill these people? He didn't need to do this 10 years ago, and suddenly he needs. It can be also a sign of absolutely weakening Putin, despite the fact that relatively Putin gets stronger in this political fight, and he guarantees himself a longer time of existence. Marnix van Bertzelaer, sorry, who could take charge of a potential second Wagner mutiny? I think everyone can. That is exactly the most funny part in the Russian politics. Everyone can be a leader. We know that Vladimir Putin came out of nowhere. like who was Vladimir Putin in 1999? Like he was for a short time head of FSB, but his career before was really weak, like some sort of economic advisor at Leningrad, St. Petersburg, City Hall. Seemed like he was like some sort of a KGB officer commanded to City Hall, but not a political leader, not a people's tribune, not an oligarch, like not an influential person. And then he was a president, and we remember how I think it was in Davos in 2000 as at some panel one of the participants asked this question: who is Mr. Putin? So he was a black horse, like nobody knew him, and now he rules Russia since over 20 years. That is exactly what can happen. Like it's like in later Roman Empire when every officer of Praetorian Guard can be the next emperor. You don't know him before he is, and he can die trying like Prigozhin did, but he may be the next one. Like, can it be Ramzan Kadyrov? Maybe, I don't think so, but maybe. Can it be like some general of FSB or of Russian army? Maybe. May it be like I don't know, like some like think about it once again. Who was Yevgeny Prigozhin before he uh, started his mutiny and marched to Moscow? Yevgeny Prigozhin in the later Soviet Union was a mid-sized criminal. He hired minors, like underage, like school children, to commit crimes, because the minors they could like get unpunished, and it was easier to work with them. So he hired them for criminal purpose, for like stealing, like other small crimes. There were rumors that he organized prostitution circles, sex work circles, etc. Don't know, but he was imprisoned. He served like pretty long time in prison. Then he came free. He started like some restaurant business, cooking business. Then somehow he got in contact with KGB, FSB, and there were rumors that he organized informal program for official visits to St. Petersburg. Like when Western delegations came, he organized food and maybe some program after, like including sex work. And that was a typical way for KGB, FSB to influence Western delegations, like with good food and good sex. And that was that what was Prigozhin was allegedly responsible for. Like we know that he also met Jacques Chirac from France in his restaurant. We have the photos of him with Vladimir Putin and George W. Bush in his restaurant. Like at least like he fed them. And after that, like he was a person who had like his money, and he started his business with troll factories, like writing commentaries on social media, in commentary sections in media, and trying to influence the Western agenda. And only after that, he was invited to be a face of Wagner Group. So, looking at his career, you would not say he's a person who would challenge a president of Russia, like a mighty person with nuclear warheads, with tank divisions, etc. You would say, like, okay, he's a crook. Like he's like some like small level criminal who doesn't have like any chance to make his political career, but he did. So that is important to understand Russia, and that is why I need to repeat it once again. We don't know who will be the next Wagner. We don't know who will be the next Putin, because everyone can be, and that is a very interesting and tricky part in the Russian political system. Mary Cast says, I thought of Lebed. Yes, exactly. Alexander Lebed, who was killed in a helicopter crash, and we still don't know what happened there. Care Sirpal Began, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name with mistake. Any thoughts of why Wagner moved to Belarus after the coup attempt, and what happened? What happens to them now? Well, once again, we don't know. We don't know what was the deal. We don't know how many of Wagner troops have been transferred to Belarus. What I saw, the number of tents in this Wagner camp in Belarus was for maybe 10,000 people, but the overall number of Wagner conscripts and mercenaries was quite larger, like 20, 30,000 people. So some of them have remained in Ukraine. We know Wagner troops have been tried to be used against Poland. I think there were plans to use them as infiltrating units with so-called migrants over the border. I think they could also be used as a troop to seize Belarus itself in a case like death of Alexander Lukashenko. That is like very interesting in Russia planning. They always like plan for many outcomes, for many scenarios. And I think that the control over Wagner troops remains mostly in the hands of Russian Ministry of Defense, because they give money, they give weapons. But I think a significant amount of Wagner mercenaries who were personally loyal to Prigozhin himself, who came to Wagner because of Prigozhin, they will try now to cancel their contracts and go back to Russia. And that is where fun starts. Because these people are sentenced criminals, mostly for violence articles of the Russian Criminal Code, rape, murder, kidnapping, attempted murder, all other crimes. And they have an experience now in Ukraine of being allowed to conduct unlimited violent acts without any punishment. So now imagine what happens when these people come back to Russia. And we know that it is happening already. That these people, the moment they come back, they start to rape, kidnap, and kill the moment they come back to their villages or towns. We know the first thing they do, they spend their money on alcohol and sex work, and then they do what they used to do in Ukraine: kidnapping, murdering, beating, raping. And now imagine if Russia gets like not 200 such people, 500, but let me say 10,000. I think Russia is about to reap what it sowed. And all the Russian, like school teachers, kindergarten or teachers, all these persons, mostly female, who praised Wagner, who organized the shows of the children wearing uniforms, chanting military songs, praising Wagner soldiers, writing postcards to thank Wagner mercenaries for what they do in Ukraine. They have now increased chances to meet Wagner mercenaries who come back to Russia and to taste their own medicine. I don't say it's good. I don't say it's something any person like should welcome, but that is reality. When you saw violence and rape and torture and murdering, you will reap it sooner or later. And now the war can come back to Russia in this very interesting form. And it's actually what happened to Russia in 1990s, when all the Russian police officers who went for their business trips, they called it business trips, to Chechnya, where they kidnapped Chechen people, where they tortured them, where they raped Chechen girls, where they indiscriminately killed people. When they all came back to Russia, and they were assigned like with the positions of police officers, and they continued to do in the police districts what they learned in Chechnya, what they enjoyed in Chechnya: raping, torturing, killing. And we know that the number of violent crimes committed by police officers in Russia inside of the police district headquarters increased rapidly in later 90s, because these people came from Chechnya with the experience. Now imagine all the Wagner mercenaries come back. Valera Kirchenko asks, how do you see Prigozhin's funeral? Will we see some revolution show? I don't know. Like we can only fantasize. Compare it with Daria Dugina's funeral, when like first like her face was miraculously restored, like she was beautiful in coffin, as if there was like no bomb under his car and the car has not burned. We can imagine Prigozhin laying in a coffin with some speeches, with some like Russian broadcasting, but also they can also try like to hide it a bit, to pull it down, not to exaggerate because of what they saw in Rostov. We don't know. Like I really I'm really interested in what will happen and how it will look like. But anyway, I think there will be propaganda show. I think Moscow will try to use this death to increase this unity of the nation, and we'll definitely see it. Marycast says salt hot dogs gross. I think like you mean Prigozhin, that was like selling hot dogs was the first business he opened after coming back from the prison. I don't see anything bad in selling hot dogs. Quite an opposite. I think that selling hot dogs is a very decent business and very decent franchise and very decent thing. But yes, like that is where he started, and exactly you don't think that a person who came back from prison and starts selling hot dogs in a couple of years will like feed U.S. president and French president, and then will be the face of Russian military operations abroad, and then will lead a mutiny against Russian president. That is very interesting, of course. Iron Bunny 80 writes, news on the Belarusian authorities to have cut off the internet in the area of the main Wagner Group camp in the Tale village in Belarus. What would that mean? I personally haven't seen that news about internet being cut down. I can imagine it. I think it can be like some precaution. Why not? And I think that anyway, like for Alexander Lukashenko, any presence of foreign military in his country is a challenge. Of course, he tries to play a Russian ally, and of course, he knows that without Russian police, without Russian army, he can face like some internal unrest and protests, and he needs the Russian presence. But at the same time, he knows that Vladimir Putin has never abandoned the plans to absorb Belarus, and for that, Vladimir Putin needs Putin's troops in Belarus and does need Alexander Lukashenko. What do you think the people in Putin's inner circle are thinking? Are they concerned for their own safety now? Well, I think yes. I think they are concerned, and we know that actually, like many. Okay, the same question, like almost, are Shoigu and Gerasimov celebrating? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think Shoigu and Gerasimov are to some sort relieved that Prigozhin is dead, because Prigozhin personally challenged them. But coming back to the first question, what do people in Putin's inner circle are thinking? I think that both Shoigu and Gerasimov are afraid. And we have seen since months very sad face of Shoigu. We saw how bad he looks. We saw how Vladimir Putin humiliated him on public. For example, when Putin and Shoigu were visiting a hospital where Putin greeted wounded Russian soldiers. Oh, those FSB agents who played Russian soldiers. But Putin demonstratively rejected presence of Shoigu, was speaking all the time turning his back to Shoigu, didn't like shake Shoigu's hand, etc. So I think that all these people remember quite well the sudden number of deaths of Russian generals in 2015 after the unsuccessful first Russian invasion to Ukraine, when the Russians' initial plan was to cut through the whole like southern coast of Ukraine to Moldova, to Transnistria. It's actually what they tried to do in 2022, but neither in 2022 nor in 2014 they have succeeded. So, but in 2014 it was even less success, and I think 5 or 7 Russian generals suddenly died during 2015, including a head of GRU military intelligence directorate, and they were all young, like they were all like in the age of 60. So it's not the age where people normally die, and especially in that density. So I think they all remember how it ends, and they understand when Vladimir Putin purges his inner circle and is looking for some treason, nobody's safe. Nobody's safe. Even if you deliver, think about the case of Russian Minister of Defense. Gosh, who was before Shoigu? The businessman, the former producer of furniture. With S. It's too late in Berlin, and I had yesterday my trip from Ukraine to Germany, and I started to forget the simple names. But anyway, there was a minister of defense who was before Shoigu, and he was a businessman, and who modernized Russian army, making Russian military more compact, like making reforms of some units, and actually enabling Russia to seize Crimea. And despite of all his success, he was imprisoned, allegedly for corruption. Anatoly Serdikov, of course. Thank you, Oren Biden. Anatoly Serdikov, and he was imprisoned, and his lover was also like suffered also imprisonment. And Serdikov was released later, and it was all fine for him. I mean, like he wasn't killed, he wasn't put in jail into jail for 10 years, but he was out of favor, despite of all his success and his results. So now think of what Shoigu is thinking and what Gerasimov is thinking when they know that Vladimir Putin will need to boost his popularity before September elections in regions and before March elections, presidential elections in Russia. Of course, elections is a fake in Russia, but still you don't want to have mass protests. And for that, you need to boost your popularity. So I think that everyone is scared in Moscow. They know that the boss is paranoid. They know that the boss has started a cleansing campaign, and they know that it can be bad for anyone. Okay, so we don't have any comments now. I think we can look what do the Russian media right now. I think it is extremely interesting to see how they comment it. Um, the Lenta.ru is a popular pro-Kremlin media. They publish news about the crash of Prigozhin's plane, but don't go into details. They say that the versions are failure of pilots, technical issues, or out impact, but they don't say anything about air defense or something. And I'll remind you, the gray zone Prigozhin's news channel says that Prigozhin's plane has been shot down by air defense. And on the video we have of the crash allegedly of the plane of Prigozhin, we hear that a woman says that there had been like 2 explosions. We can Here on Vestiru is the site of the biggest Russian state-owned television. They say that the death of Prigozhin and Utkin is confirmed. And what do they say there? Um, yes, Prigozhin and Utkin died, and no official confirmation, but they say it happened. And interestingly, that uh, the same news page published one of the other news is that Vladimir Putin has warmly discussed issues with inhabitants of Kursk region. So I think they still didn't have like any Kremlin approved comments, and they don't know what to report on the case. Their messages on this crash of airplane are very short and very unemotional, like just very few lines. Komsomolskaya Pravda, a Kreml loyal tabloid. Um, First, okay, that is interesting because they confirm authenticity of the video I talked to you about, where a woman says that two explosions have been heard, and yeah, they know that they say like where it happened, etc. 26 minutes after start in Moscow it happened, etc. Well, like nothing significant in the Russian media, but what we can also say about what happened, like I have heard already ideas. um Voltaire iPhone, you missed my comment. I haven't seen your comment. Would you please repeat it because I don't see this comment amid other comments. If you would kindly repeat your comment, I would be happy. I have seen ideas that Prigozhin could try to fake his own death, like he wanted to hide himself, to go under a door, and so he faked his death. It can sound good because, indeed, in a plane crash with explosion, bodies can be deformed to some extent. And we know that Prigozhin had an army of his doubles. He had like a lot of passports issued for different people. He also was constantly was seeking for a person who looked like him, and he sent this person. It was like really weird. He sent this person to the EU and making like urging them to make a photo of this person in front of official buildings like Parliament or Ministry of Interior Affairs in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, etc. And he used these photos as proofs that European sanctions don't work on him, and he has official meetings with the authorities. So theoretically, Prigozhin indeed had an opportunity to fake his death, like using his double with his documents, etc. But I don't think it is a realistic version. Why? Because the acts of Prigozhin before this crash didn't look like he is seeking for escape. Quite the opposite. He was constantly present in Russian media, in on the Russian territory, at Russian official meetings. He was present at Russia Africa Summit. He was constantly traveling between Moscow and Petersburg. His plane was constantly seen in flying between Moscow, Petersburg, sometimes Minsk, but mostly he was in Russia and was very visible. It doesn't look like he tried to hide. If a person like Prigozhin would have wanted to hide, he would have gone to Africa, started there like some enterprise, like some adventure, and then suddenly died somewhere in a plane in like over the jungles of Congo. That's it. But not in Moscow, not after his presence. not in a plane where like FSB can like make analysis of his DNA. I'm pretty sure he has left a lot of his DNA, and the samples are also being kept in FSB. I'm pretty sure, and I don't think that it is a realistic way to hide from Vladimir Putin if you really want to. And I also think it is a proof that the idea that Prigozhin's mutiny has been staged by Vladimir Putin is wrong. That it was a real mutiny which failed, and there were like real opponents of Vladimir Putin who wanted to influence the situation, but they could not agree what to do. That's why Prigozhin was left alone. And Prigozhin tried to save himself by signing some sort of agreement, but this agreement wasn't working because Russia. And after that, Prigozhin massively demonstrated his loyalty. I think his appearance at all the conferences was an attempt to tell Putin, look, I'm all exposed. I'm all in your possession. You can kill me whenever you want. I don't hide. I don't do anything. I'm always in Moscow, in Russia, in Petersburg, where FSB has full access to me, and that's why I'm not a danger for you. But as we know, in Russia, um, it is not enough to not to be danger. It is enough that you have been danger once, and since then you need to be eliminated first because you can come back to your bad experience and second you can be a bad example. And I think this spectacular way of death of Prigozhin is also a part of a lesson because the crime was so massive that the punishment must be also spectacular. Like no heart attack, no like some sort of like falling out of window, no some unexplained death, no, like being shot down from the sky in his business jet by Russian air defense is the perfect way to make a statement. Like, don't mess with Putin. I think it has been done. So I still don't have like any comments by Voltaire's iPhone. Maybe we will have it. So up to now, we can also have a look what do we have like on other channels like Telegram, Twitter, media. Like we don't have like a lot of media reports. Mm, like the Russian investigation committee, Следственный комитет (SK), says that they will check like two versions: a version of external impact, can be a bomb, can be a missile, and a technical failure. Um, we also have a news that in Belarus at Machulishi airport, which is very close to Wagner camp, a Russian military transport plane Il-76 has landed at almost at 9 p.m. local time. So after Prigozhin's alleged death, which can be a sign that they bring something there, which can be a sign they want to bring something out of there. But anyway, there is a movement there, which can mean anything. And yeah, there are news that Wagner is preparing a statement on Prigozhin death, and we have a lot of condolences on Wagner Telegram channels, on Wagner news channels, which all confirm Prigozhin's death. Well, of course, it can be all fake, of course, but as I said to you, why I think it is not fake, why I think it is a real death, and why I think that Prigozhin has really reached his window of opportunity, which opened for him. Well, That is practically everything. Um, we know that in Ukraine the news has been accepted with a lot of enthusiasm because Prigozhin did a lot of bad things in Ukraine, and also today is Ukraine's national holiday, national the day of Ukrainian flag. Tomorrow is the day of independence. So there are a lot of jokes on Ukrainian news channels and Ukrainian social media saying that it was really like a good day. Um, okay, Walter's iPhone. You cannot see my comment. I posted twice. No, I have never seen it. I just ask you if you think the threat on gray zone of repercussions for Prigozhin killers is credible threat or online bravado. Well, I think it is. I think it is more bravado. Like I think it belongs to a normal like way of commenting such news. Like we will punish them. Like nobody will get unpunished. And I think they paused it because they need to, because otherwise it would look like fishy. Like our boss and leader and founding father has been killed, but we don't swear to revenge. Are we real men? Are we like soldiers? No. But like who they want to punish? If we imagine this was ordered by Putin himself, and I think it was ordered by Putin himself, will they try to kill Putin? Or will they try to kill a missile operator who shot a missile? Uh, like who they want to punish? Like Shoigu, Gerasimov, Putin? Who? I think it's bravado. And I think that most of these people they will be digested, incorporated, acquired by the Russian military, and they are practically part of Russian military. Some independent leaders who developed too much popularity, who gained too much authority, will be eliminated. What always happens with passionate leaders in such regimes. Like we know that there have been a lot of deaths of Russian nationalists during the last months, military bloggers, journalists, okay, journalists like propagandists, like the Prosvirin, Yegor Prosvirin, the founding father of media, nationalist, far right nationalist media, Sputnik and Pogrom, who just jumped out of window in Moscow and killed himself allegedly. Daria Dugina, others, Vladlen Tatarsky, military blogger, who was, of course, a part of GRU propaganda unit, who was killed by an explosion in Moscow, attempted kill on Zahar Perlepin. Like, we will need just to wait, and I think if we wait a couple of months, we will see maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, we will see some more deaths on Russian nationalist spectrum, authors, writers, warlords, etc. What will happen like to these people? Like they are not needed for Kremlin. The Kremlin is afraid of any leadership, even if it is a leadership which is anti-Ukrainian and which is allegedly pro-Moscow. They don't want to have strong leaders. They don't want to have popular leaders. They want to have loyalty. And Prigozhin demonstrated illoyalty and like some wish to act and to jump above his head. And that made him a candidate for death. I think this is most important. Like promises to punish, to revenge. I don't think it's possible. Okay, so I think we finish here. Maybe there will be more news tomorrow, day after tomorrow. We have already talked for 1 hour on this live stream. Thank you, everyone who was watching it. Don't forget to subscribe, please. Really, you will not miss new live streams. You will not miss new interviews. And we still need like 220, if I'm not mistaken, before this live. I hope now we missed less. subscriptions to unlock new features for our video channel. And stay with us. I think we will see a lot of interesting developments, also with liberation of Ukrainian territories by the Ukrainian army, also by new explosions in Crimea, in other occupied regions. And yes, I think Ukraine will win as soon as possible, better sooner than later, better with more Western support than with less. And thank you that you have been here. Keep safe, keep cool, stay in touch, and we'll see. Thank you so much. Have a great day.